those thoughts creep up into my mind, is it like, okay, is it more training, which is all I know? Is it more vacation time? But at the end of the day, I prepare my mind.
Hello humans, welcome to the M Word, the Manx Sports podcast, brought to you by Martin. That's me.
I'm Matt.
That's him. Hello Matthew, how are you today?
Pretty tired actually, to be honest.
Why now? Why is that? Late nights, too many beers, Christmas parties?
I wish. A lot of Zwifting, dog walking. Getting into the scene with Santa coming out with the on the back of the tractor, coming around the estate in Colby. The boys were loving that.
So our guest today will introduce in a few moments' time. It follows on nicely from our last episode with Richard. But first of all, we just want to say a quick thank you again, as we do each week, to Billboards.im, their sponsor of our show. They do exactly what it says on the tin, which is billboard advertising, but digitally. You'll have seen them down the C terminal in town as well. So if you need to get your brand out there, make yourself known to people, much like we're trying to do at the moment, they're the guys to go and see. So that's billboards.im, the future of advertising. We're also looking, obviously, if there's additional sponsors to help us invest further, to help us promote the podcast to a wider audience. We'd obviously welcome all those as well. So Matthew, as we do each week, there was some audio in the part of the introduction there. Did you recognise the voice?
Yeah, I was happy to say I do know that one. It's LeBron James.
Okay, yeah, well done. So LeBron's a basketball player, for those that don't know, top of his game, probably one of the, not a massive basketball fan, but probably one of the best in the world, around the Michael Jordan kind of category. And LeBron's well known for his dedication to his sport, obviously, but also in that environment, working on his mind and his mindset and his mindfulness, which is obviously one of our key words within what we're trying to do and promote within our podcast. And today we're joined by Mike Kewley. So welcome firstly, Mike.
Hello, thanks for inviting me along.
No, pleasure. So Mike works in the mindful space. I think by his own admission, isn't a sportsman per se, but certainly from my own experience, I've been on one of Mike's courses. They're certainly beneficial, and I think when you relate what he practices into the sports environment, well, there's many top athletes already using the techniques to help, and we'll dig into a bit more of that in due course with Mike. So I think crack on straight into it, that's all right. So the first question I ask all guests, Mike, is, are you a come over? Are you Manx? Are you Manx, or are you Manx as the hills?
I think I'm as Manx as the hills. I'm a Kewley, so.
Oh right, yeah.
That's you
got 3 legs.
It's a good start.
Yeah, you got 3 legs, and a Manx accent. So maybe just to get a bit of background on yourself for our audience, where were you brought up on the Isle of Man?
I was brought up in Douglas. We were just talking about this before. Glen Park. So I went to Williston School.
Okay.
So. Yeah, lived there all my life. Went to university when I was a bit older.
Right.
I went when I was 25, so I was a mature student.
Right. Where was that?
I went to Lampeter in Wales.
Okay.
And then I went to, I was living in Bristol, and then I did a master's degree in Cornwall. So I lived down in Falmouth.
What were you studying, sorry?
Well, I did my first degree was religious studies, which, I was and still am kind of fascinated by, and then my master's was in something called Western esotericism.
Oh, I know that well.
Yeah, people sometimes say Western terrorism. No, esotericism. So in a nutshell, it was the esoteric traditions of the Western world. So you think of the West and you think Christianity. That's what we had. Yeah. Well, there was lots and lots bubbling away under the surface, like alchemy and magic and all this other kind of stuff. So it was a kind of study of that, which was interesting. But during the whole time I was studying, I spent a lot of my 20s traveling. So I travelled to India quite a lot, and Nepal and Pakistan and Burma and Thailand and other countries, all with this kind of aim and goal of meeting people and teachers and gurus sometimes who could basically enlighten me.
Right, okay.
So I spent a lot of time doing that and practicing and exploring different practices, and it all linked into my fascination with meditation and mindfulness and things like that.
So I assume, and I know you've mentioned to me, it was your father that's the space your father worked in, so I suppose that's where the influence came from, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm my dad Mark II.
Right.
And to the extent where he's also called Mike Kewley.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I grew up around Buddhism because he was a Buddhist monk in the Theravada tradition, which is Burmese Buddhism. So he was a lay monk, which means you're a Buddhist, but you don't live in a monastery and you don't shave your head. But he still would go to he wouldn't go to Burma, but he went to Birmingham, which is where his teacher was. So not too far. But it's almost a different language. Yeah. So he would spend time there, and then he did ordain as a monk for a period as well, where he shaved his head and he lived in the monastery in Birmingham with his Burmese teacher. And he set up the first Buddhist group on the Isle of Man in the 80s, and I would hang out there as a child, not really knowing what everyone was doing, sitting cross-legged on the floor. In front of these, kind of big Buddha statues, and I used to copy them. I used to, bow to the Buddha. Didn't really know what it was about, but that was like an image that kind of got ingrained in my psyche, I suppose. I remember coming downstairs every morning. My dad would be meditating, and before we got up, he worked at the factory there, the Martin Baker.
Okay, yeah.
So he made aircraft seats for a living, but he'd be up at 5 o'clock in the morning to meditate for 2 hours, chanting in Pali, hardcore. Proper hardcore stuff. So that's what I remember coming downstairs to, was him meditating, and I guess soaking up some of that kind of the importance of that, or the value. Or
I was going to say, did he ask you to join in, or was it anything that of you at that age? Was it any other, right? Was that okay?
No, it wasn't. So he was a Buddhist. We were brought up Buddhist, but I do vividly remember having arguments with my gran, basically on Buddhism versus Christianity, even as a young child. So I was very, very influenced by Buddhism, and later in my life, my dad as a teacher could. He could. He could turn you into a Buddhist, but he could kind of officially. Make you a Buddhist, and you could have a Buddhist name and all that kind of stuff, and that was attractive to me. But I've never really been anything. I'm not religious. I don't define myself as anything. Even human is a label. I'm more interested in what's under the label. So I never really did end up being a Buddhist, but it certainly had a huge influence on me. And the mindfulness that I teach, it comes largely from my dad and from the mindfulness traditions. And especially Zen Buddhism. I was very influenced and brought up around Zen. My dad was fascinated by Japanese Buddhism, samurai stories, all this kind of stuff. So, yeah.
I just want to actually read something or read out something I read today, because I'm conscious that certain people, I believe, or a lot of people, have an element of not judge, but hear Zen or meditation and the immediate whatever type mentality. And it's something I read that said mindfulness is a practice of carefully following attention and focus, and does not form a religion. So I think certainly when I've been on the course and you chat to friends about it, and they don't mock you, but they're like, oh yeah, is this a religion you're joining? And I think part of obviously the podcast is to talk about the benefits of the practices you do, but would you generally agree with that statement?
I would. Obviously, Buddhism is a religion. You can debate that.
Well, I think it was mindfulness was the quote here. Mindfulness is a practice of carefully focused attention, that doesn't form part of a religion.
Yeah, and it's nested in Buddhism. It's the practices within what we call Buddhism. But I would agree. It's not about belief. In fact, it's about putting your beliefs to one side, or at least questioning all the things that you've believed, because they in some way limit you. When we get conditioned, we get brought up to believe X, Y, and Z. I can or I can't. I should or I shouldn't. And mindfulness is the invitation to kind of see what happens if you let all of that noise and all that conditioning just fall away for a moment. Like, what's left? And what's left is you, but a completely different you, which can be quite freeing.
And your courses you run locally, that's the focus initially.
That's it, and it is a bit different to kind of other kinds of mindfulness, I suppose, just because I bring in all the other influences that I've had in my own practice from different traditions and different teachers. So so the way I talk about my courses are that it's a kind of mindfulness training course. So it is a kind of brain training or mind training. So in a nutshell, since we've been cavemen and cavewomen, we've been able to train and develop certain mental skills that basically enhance your life. Perspectives, attitudes, ways of seeing and being in the world that are basically revolutionary. Every culture has them. You could choose any culture in the world and they'd have their version of mindfulness. Like I was talking once and a Nigerian lady came up to me afterwards and said, oh yeah, in our culture we call it whatever it was. The tribes people, they have their name. Apart from our culture, we've essentially lost that connection with the present moment. And actually, one way we find the present moment is through sport. Because when you're completely focused, which you should be if you're engaged, there's the present moment. There's the flow state. There's the absence of past and future. You're just in the moment. Now, that's mindfulness.
So you mentioned there about that mindfulness training and flow state. So again, getting a tiny bit of education from you to this point is the flow state, concentration and emotion regulation. So they're the key, I suppose, aspects that form part of that mindfulness.
So being mindful just means, so if we contrast it with mindlessness, which means when basically we live most of our lives in a state of distraction. So we live in our heads. So yeah, we live in a state of overthinking. We're constantly thinking about everything. In fact, that's a huge problem in our culture is we don't know how to stop thinking. Keeps us awake, causes anxiety. We're always thinking about something. We've literally forgotten how to switch off. Which is very unhealthy because we're constantly being triggered by our own thoughts. So yeah, we live in this constant state of distraction. And so yeah, being pulled into thoughts, we're never really present, we're never really here, we're never really now, we're always somewhere else.
And I just want to bring back to your earlier point there where you mentioned about different cultures having a word for mindfulness and that we don't, in a sense, or why is that? Where's that kind of been lost in a sense with our culture?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it has been lost. I mean, we are rediscovering it now, but only because we're at crisis point. The fact that yoga, meditation, mindfulness, etc., is so popular at the moment, and they teach it in schools, for instance, is because we've realised how bad things are. So things are swinging back towards what we've lost.
When you say we, you mean the Western world?
I mean, the Western world, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, being on the Isle of Man, we had a Celtic culture, so probably not too far from here, there'll be some kind of keel, a keel, like a chapel, a kind of ruined keel, where you would have a hermit. So you'd have, a man or a woman who'd go and they'd sit in the glen and they'd sit in the nice little hermitage, the stone chapel, and they'd essentially meditate. So in a Christian context, they'd pray, but that could be silent prayer. So that's just basically dropping into stillness and being immersed or absorbed into their environment and just being with it, fully alive in that moment. That's mindfulness. And all people have done that because in a way that's the natural state. That's what the cavemen and women did because they didn't have much to think about. So they could just drop into what was happening. And of course they needed to do that to stay alive. You need to be alert, you need to be present. If our ancestors weren't extremely good at being present, there'd be 3 empty chairs. There'd still be there'd still be like wild animals roaming because we would have been eaten. So we've spent, hundreds of thousands of years knowing how to get present and still and alert. And we've just gradually lost it. It's kind of been phased out. And especially in our modern culture, the emphasis is on busyness. So even our technology keeps you busy and it keeps you hooked into it. For instance, we have 2 rush hours every day. So 2 rush hours, just the name of that rush, 2 hours where you're desperate to get home or desperate to get work in a rush. And you know how that feels. It's the most anxious time of the day is getting to work or getting home. Every single day for your whole life if you work a normal job. There's no calm hour, there's no still hour. But that's what we need to build in or create ourselves. Otherwise, there's just no balance, and you get sucked into this vortex of constant busyness, and then suddenly, that's it, you're dead. You know, you spent your whole life being busy, and then it's like, well, where was life? Well, it was here, but in a way where we were running around and it was just a blur.
So I do want to cycle back to or understanding a little bit more you learning through those practices, but just to apply that general rushed mind mentality to sport now, and how top performance athletes are using it. Are they using the techniques then to get rid of that noise around them in essence?
Yeah, because you don't want that noise.
Right.
You know, when you're...
So they might be doubts, they might be...
Doubts, internal chatter.
Right.
Yeah, which we all have. I mean, that is the human mind. So mindfulness is a way of learning how to manage the human mind, which is one thing. And then I was on a workshop with someone, and they said, so this is just mind management then? And I said, yes and no, because it's deeper than that. We actually start to go beyond the mind. You step back from the mind, you know, discover who and what you are beyond the mind, beyond thoughts. That's going a bit deeper. But essentially it's, you know, tried and tested techniques from people that have been doing these practices for hundreds of years on how to make your mind your best friend, you know, an ally, to use the power of the mind rather than misuse it. And generally we just misuse it, which means we get sucked into every single thought it comes up with. So yeah, as a sportsman or woman, you want a clear focus. You want to be in the flow state. And a flow state is a high level of concentration where nothing intrudes. That is the state at which you are at your best.
So sometimes you hear about top performance athletes, they'll talk about, I envisaged the win, is that, when they talk about that, is that more before they're going into that flow state? That's maybe part of their training.
Yes.
A generally training, mind training as well, up to the point of, let's say, fight night, and then fight night comes, they'll yes, they've envisaged winning up to that point, but at fight night time, it's getting to the flow state. Yeah,
exactly. So that kind of training, if you like, would be using positive imagination or visualization, I suppose, which again is using your mind rather than misusing it. There was a study where they asked some people over a period of time to imagine they were lifting weights as they fell asleep for a set, maybe 10 minutes every night, something like that. And you know what happened when the study was up?
Please don't tell me they're bigger guns.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to start doing that.
Yeah, there was no actual weights involved. They imagined it. The thing is that your brain and my brain does not know the difference between a thought and something real, which is why a nightmare works. You have a nightmare, it's like, oh my God, this is real. It's only when you wake up that you go, thank God it's not real. So what goes on in your head, as far as your brain is concerned, is happening.
Wow.
So this is why we need to train that.
Right. So you could Zwift at night now, man. That's what you're thinking when you're fast asleep. You could be on Zwift, couldn't you? Training even more on your bike.
24 hours.
But this is why they use it. This, you know, it's sitting on the chair right now is the most powerful thing in the universe. It's so powerful, but misused, it's so destructive. And we all know that flavor of it. It can drag you down, it can keep you small, or you can use it to literally go like above and beyond anything you thought possible.
So using that point around motivation and habit, that's using then that mindset to help you create good habits, help you create good motivation. I imagine that's, maybe an unbelievable tool that most people probably use a tiny bit, and some people don't use it all, and use the opposite way. Yeah,
we get used by it. People, we get used by all our thoughts. It's the ultimate motivational tool, this mind. And so you can use it before something to visualize positive imagery, see yourself doing it, etc. People have been able to kind of enable healing, broken bones, things like this, or to at least help the healing process by using their imaginative skills. You know, it all helps.
And do you work in that field? I don't necessarily mean bones, but generally people's, obviously my experience with you is just, I suppose, learning the basics of mindfulness, but do you work in that space as well of not motivating, but help people move to a positive space from a negative space?
I mean, generally speaking, that's why people do mindfulness. But what they'll be experiencing generally falls into two categories, I would say. One is people that are really stuck and having a really bad time.
Okay.
You know, they have anxiety, depression, trauma, etc. They're in a cycle and they don't know how to get out of it. And we get them out of it by training up different skills and winding down the ones that dominate. Basically because what you pay attention to grows and continues and develops. So if you have a head full of fears and worries and anxieties, as long as you're watching that movie, the movie will get bigger and brighter and more embedded. If you can take your attention off the movie and into something else, and you've just done some of the practices we put our attention into, then that starts to grow. So so we're basically gardening. We're planting new things and we're letting the old weeds basically fade off and die out.
And if you're able to easily sum up, what type of practices are those to change that movie? Is it, you know, that cycle of...
I could tell you now, of course. It's like an exam.
So basically, another way of talking about mindfulness is that it's a kind of attention training. Because attention is how your brain builds itself and builds your mind and builds your experience. It's all based upon what we're focusing on in every single moment. So so most of the time we're just getting dragged into thoughts, and then we kind of build those thoughts in. In neuroscience they say that mental states become character traits, because the more you pay attention to something, the more embedded it will become in your experience.
Yeah, just chatting when we were chatting. I mentioned we were chatting with Richard Sill, and he's coming at it from a sports psychology point of view, but very much similar as well. Of that, just we were talking, I think, about how when you grow up and you surround him, and you talk about your father earlier, but your surroundings so become embedded in who you are, and you know, in your not in your genes, but you know, in who you are. So I suppose it's exactly the same process, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. So we can begin to consciously choose what we want to develop by focusing on it or not focusing on it.
Yeah.
So your attention's like a spotlight, and whatever you light up with it, it will grow and thrive and continue, and you will feel like that. Or you can learn how to shift the spotlight into something completely different, and that will grow and thrive, and you will feel like that.
And so someone's 21, that had certain things that put them in that position. Maybe they're a negative of nature. They've had bereavements and troubles all through, and they're sat at 21 going, my life's a parlour. You believe there's that ability to retrain the brain?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't believe it.
No, you know it.
It's and through my own experience, because when I was around that age, my life was a pile of stuff. Exactly.
Right.
So one of the two most important things anyone can learn, and obviously this applies to sports, is how to shift gear into focus and calm.
Right.
There is no experience that we can have where being more focused and more calm simultaneously will not help, whether it's on the sports field or sipping your coffee in the morning. You can enhance every single moment of your life when you know how to drop into it and turn it into a kind of flow state.
Okay.
I was going to say, so bring it to sports people, kind of, I guess it's a general statement of, why is every sports person not doing this then? Like, if it was just a case of, this is the secret, or well, not so much secret, because we're trying to, grow this, but
It's like,
why is it not like you have your training, you have your strength, you have your skills, you have your mindset? As in that's what I think should be. Well, by the sounds of it, should be happening, but in a it's not something that I would say from my personal experience or anything like that it's
not on the
at
radar,
the forefront, or at least on the radar. So it's kind of, if it is seen as such a big thing, why is everyone not doing it? Is that again the Western sort of belief or side to it, is that it's just kind of in the background, and it might help, it might not, we're not too sure, I
think we're still getting there. I mean, with big business, it's everywhere. So Google, Deutsche Bank, I mean the biggest companies in the world run mindfulness training, and the CEOs lead the training, so they're completely on board with it. It is there in sports. I mean, you mentioned basketball. So Kobe Bryant, who, I mean, I'm not any kind of expert at all, but I know of him because his trainer got him and his team to do mindfulness. And I mean, Kobe Bryant was pretty good anyway. And through the training, he says he now plays effortless basketball, which is something you'd think Bruce Lee would say. It's a kind of effortless thing. But that's because he's not just playing in a flow state, it pours over into your everyday life. So you live as you feel yourself to be on the sports field. You live in that kind of effortless flow where you're focused and calm. You're not getting pulled into things. You're not exploding into drama. Everything is fairly steady, and you know that you have access to a kind of reservoir of stillness and calm should you need it. But we are still catching up. I know some friends teach the Adidas runners. So actually we just did See, Hear, Feel. That was the last practice we've just done. So they teach the Adidas runners in various cities all over the place, See, Hear, Feel, which is what I use when I run. So, I mean, I just run for fun. But, I mean, running is meditation to me. I'm not just running listening to music. I say I run naked, but you know what I mean.
Like you are now, you
I've got my clothes on.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah.
like we all are.
Yeah. In this sauna. Off track quickly.
Yes.
Now, I imagine, going back to Matty's question around, like, certainly as cyclists over the number of years, we've been brought up around the sky of marginal gains where they've looked at every bit of the sport and tried to improve it. And I guess this is an area, I don't know whether Sky necessarily or Ineos as they now do that, but that's just an area that perhaps more people need to develop, which is ultimately why we wanted you in this room, was to talk about that again, a marginal gain that people can get, irrespective of how it can affect just their personal headspace, work environment, family life, and those things.
And usually it's done as the kind of other way around. Like, people practice it because they want to have a more enhanced, focused, present experience of being alive. But the nice thing there is it will bleed into every single thing you do, being with your kids, on the bike, whatever. There's a very famous book, I think it was written in the 1930s, maybe earlier, a German guy that went to study Zen in Japan, Eugene Herrigel, and it's called Zen and the Art of Archery. And it's basically on how Zen, or mindfulness, focus, concentration power, applies to the art of archery. But then you can just apply that to anything, any sport. There's Zen in the art of basketball, Zen in the art of cycling. I mean, Zen in the art of golf is a thing. You look at in the sports section, how many books are on mindfulness for golf, Zen in the art of golf, where you drop into that effortless play, where all the fear and the worry and the doubt is just not there. There's just this clear, focused mind.
Interesting. So, quick question around those: is the studies out to show the effectiveness of it? People tracking brainwaves, I guess, ultimately, and showing that improvement and those changes in the brainwaves, perhaps calmer brainwaves, or however those types of things are registered or recorded. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, there's about 40 years worth of neuroscience research on people that practice mindfulness. There's even research on, I mean, traditionally the goal, but the eventual destination of practice is what you would call enlightenment or awakening, and we might think they're just kind of mythical things, but they're more like states of mind that become normal or common, rather than kind of busy, frantic, dramatic states of mind. Your new normal just becomes this very clear sense of being in the moment that lacks that self-narrative. I have to do this, then I have to do this, and then, oh my God, my past, oh my God. That just doesn't happen anymore. So I remember living in my head, and I remember living in the stories in my head and being basically dominated by the voice in my head.
I think we all do to some extent, some degree, don't we?
Well, I don't have that now. And the only reason I don't have it, I just say that just so people know that it's possible for that narration just to basically die out. You don't have to live with it anymore. And that's just very practical as a person, because it made my life miserable. And now I'm not miserable, But just Google mindfulness. I mean, the research is still coming in because it's kind of new, even though we've been studying it for about 40 years or so. But then you get the Olympic level meditators. So people at the sort of Dalai Lama level, where, you know, the things they can do with their brains, we didn't know you could do that. So if you think about mindfulness as a kind of ability to shift gears. So we live most of our lives in kind of first gear. That's thinking. That's a tough gear to drive around in if you think there's only that gear. Then you know how it feels when you shift to second gear. The car kind of thanks you for it. It goes, everything's a bit smoother. Third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear. I mean, I'm no expert on cars, but I'm sure there's more, depending on what vehicle you drive. There's an infinite number of gears we can shift into if we're shown how. And so what we're discovering is that the brain is just this, the capacity is just endless, you know. So let's do it. And the crazy thing is that we don't. And we just stay trapped and locked into these kind of self-defeating, limiting states of mind that we take to be normal and ordinary. Well, it doesn't have to be. Train it down. Train up something new.
Yeah, like motivation being a good habit. Or
that's it. It's kind of habit training.
Yeah, right.
Wind down the habits that don't make sense anymore and develop the habits that shift you into this kind of optimum state of mind.
Yeah. Still a lot of stuff I've watched on YouTube about habit, and just we've all got bad habits. That's some you know, but it's just trying to get rid of those ones and replace them with a good habit, whatever that might be.
Yeah. And the first step is just to notice. Is just to notice your habits. I mean, that's what we do.
That's half the battle, probably more than half the battle, isn't it?
Well, once you've noticed it, its days are numbered. But until you notice it, it just lives in plain sight, and somehow we don't see it. This is why, you know, in some of the mindfulness practices that we do, I mean, we didn't do the one I'm thinking of, but it's about kind of self-appraisal and noticing where we've made mistakes in the day. So you would jot down, I made a mistake here and I made a mistake there. And that's really crucial because we don't do that. We know we are our own blind spots. And when someone points something out, we will go, no, I don't. You do that. That's not me, that's you. Now we're expert. I mean, look at Donald Trump. We are experts at that. It bounces off. Until we can let something in, we're not going to change anything. Until you see it, you can't change it. So really, most of mindfulness is just noticing we have a head full of thoughts, noticing all the stress we carry in the body, noticing the themes that we think about. That's it, notice it. As soon as you've noticed it, now you have a choice. Do I follow it or do I change direction?
So to circle back then to your, Matty's absorbing that.
No, just that when you're saying that, I'm just thinking about applying to myself of the races you do, the things when as soon as you finish, you think, I should have done that. I should have done this, and you replay a sprint or a moment over your times, and you just think,
you
get caught in that. As you say, the spiral of you concentrate on that rather than something else you may have done actually well, or where you were before that moment or after. It's just you can get hung up on the bad things that you always think about, and straight away when you said that, I go straight into my head of I've done something silly or a mistake or a failure in that sense before, and it's not what should be coming back to me in the first thought, which as you said, it gets imprinted in a lot of people. So you mentioned something like that, and
it gets imprinted in most people.
Well, they say the brain has a negativity bias, so it tends to dwell on the stuff that's gone wrong, which is fine. But as soon as you notice that next time, you can shift gear. As soon as you catch yourself in that, you go, God, I'm doing it now. You could focus on breath. That's what we were doing mindfulness. We'd focus your attention into the feeling of breath in your body, for instance, which takes you out of that rumination, and then the rumination just falls away. So there's things we can do to consciously catch ourselves doing the bad things and then go, right, well, I'm going to stop that by taking my attention away from it. And then that naturally just dies off by itself.
So that first good habit everyone needs to do is 10 minutes a day, Google mindfulness and start teaching yourself.
Yeah, well, 10 minutes a day, we know within 6 to 8 weeks of a daily practice. Your brain is like a muscle. It's plastic in the sense that you can train it.
You can train it with the bad habits, so flip it around.
Start training up the good. And within 6 to 8 weeks, if you were to have an MRI scan, you'd see the brain physically or physiologically starting to make those changes.
And if I may use a real life example, actually, and shockingly, it is Zwift. Earlier tonight, I was doing a race, and all day I've been thinking about how tired I was, even leading up to the race. So I get on the bike, first thing I'm thinking of is that I'm tired. The course profile's flat, ends up a hill, so every little kick that's going on, I'm in my own head thinking that, oh, my legs aren't responding how I want to, I'm not feeling good tonight. I'm trying to give some validity to the fact that if I don't do well, there's a reason behind it. All I was doing was kind of in my head thinking that when we get to this final part, that I'm not going to do well, I've got a reason, and all those sort of bad thoughts were replaying in my mind, and everything I was doing was thinking about the future and what may happen rather than concentrating on actually how my body feels at that moment, which probably was actually I'm feeling okay. Don't think about everything else that may or may not happen, just similar to what would be in that moment, and what will happen. And yeah, I think that's well,
I guess that's what the training ultimately helps get away those not bad thoughts,
yeah,
but those
and
negative thoughts, and either removes them completely, I guess, or brings in positive ones.
Yeah, and especially, you know, if I would have, which is why, you know, we're here talking, is to educate, especially myself, about know much prior of, if I'd have known some techniques, if I'd have been able to think a lot more clearly about everything, then the results, well, I did okay. I'll just say I did okay. I got third, but you know, I always want the win.
Yeah.
Then those results, or that mindset, that ability to say, okay, I did that. It happened, because instead I'm sat here talking about it 4 hours later, rather than not worrying about it. Tomorrow's a new day. Let's see what happens in the next one.
Yeah, and then so as you said, you know, the training would in advance, you know, prepare you to kind of be more focused and less likely to get pulled into that kind of negative narrative. When the negative narrative strikes, you'll be more aware of it, so you'd catch it happening and maybe do something different. You know, so you can't stop it coming up. It's just it's a habit. So it's not like that shouldn't happen. It does happen. Just catch yourself in it and change direction. And then the other thing the practice will do is enhance your performance whilst you're doing it. So it will enhance the flow state. So when you're really focused on the bike, or, you know, if I go running or something, when I'm using a technique, when I'm basically meditating, I've had moments where the flow state is so enhanced, you feel superhuman. You feel like you're about to explode in a positive way. It's quite interesting. I'm a drummer. I was going to say I'm a musician, but I'm a drummer. That's a bit different.
Used to do a bit myself.
Oh, good, yeah. Well, so this is years ago when I was in my late teens, but I was practicing, and I used to meditate before I went to the rehearsal room, just to kind of get the most out of the session, you know, clear my mind. And I sat there once, and I was playing a song that I was learning, and just after meditating, and all of a sudden something happened. And what happened was that I was playing it perfectly, you know, it was kind of straight there, but I wasn't playing. I looked at my hands and they were doing what they should, my feet were doing what they should. It was all moving, but it was as if I was not doing that. And for about 3 seconds it was incredible, because I was like, oh my God, this is just effortless. I'm not even doing this. And then I freaked out and went, oh my God. and I fell out of the flow state. But that's deep flow. You know, when you just know where the ball, you know automatically where the ball's going to bounce, or you know you were just there on time, or you did the right thing. That's the flow state. In martial arts they have it. You know, you don't think about it, you just act. And there's a kind of effortlessness in the acting. Yeah, so it would enhance your ability to stay on that bike and just drop into the flow state, as you said, be in your body more, and just meet whatever happens as it happens.
Yeah.
So I suppose you mentioned obviously about going to study. You're on an evolution of learning, I'm sure. It started probably with your dad, and you sat around trying to do Buddha and not really understanding what's going on. Did that then in your late, and we're obviously circling back a little bit here, but in your late teens then, was that something you were then, no pun intended, focused on? This is where I want to. where was kind of the point in your own life that you decided to go, yeah, this is, I want to, or was it just like just continue to develop, and what you do today is just a natural fallout of your continued learning?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. But there was a kind of goal as a child, which was that, you know, I saw, certainly for my dad, that the goal of his life anyway was literally enlightenment, which
Right.
is the traditional goal of Buddhism, because, you know, the Buddha was enlightened and then shared how to get enlightened. And so if you practice that, you're kind of moving in that direction. So that was quite terrifying for a child, because I was like, okay, so there exists out there something that maybe we call it truth or reality, or, you know, and it's my job to find out what that is. But that was a serious thing.
To a layman, that, and you would have asked me that 2 years ago, I'd have been just, you know, just, I don't know, you'd sound bonkers is probably the honest answer.
Well, it might be bonkers.
Well, maybe we are, yeah. So, yeah, it's funny how the perceptions change, and you know, my own views of that situation, and having done just a tiny little bit of it, and maybe just starting to feel like the door's cracking open, and there's light there going, yeah, maybe there is something to this hippie stuff that we would have called it 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, and that's what all my friends called me as teenagers.
Yeah.
I was the hippie. So then, you know, that was why I studied the religious traditions, all aimed at this kind of...
but with no direction, it was just learning. What can I learn? What culture? And just see how I develop as an individual.
How do I get that? Like, how do I get enlightened? Basically, that was if I'm honest, that was my goal. To the extent where all the lectures I attended at university, I was ready to hear the magic words from one of the lecturers, or hear some kind of ancient saying, and then close my book and leave.
Oh, right,
like literally
okay.
go, because I'm not here for a degree. I'm here for that drop of wisdom to actually click. And you know, there were lots of little clicks, but nothing major. And even traveling in India and meeting gurus and teachers, again, there were moments, there were shifts, there were insights. But the biggest one was actually when I had this breakdown when I was 29, and there was a major shift then. And since then, I must say that I'm no longer looking for anything. I'm no longer seeking anything. I no longer get the sense that there's a lack here that I need to fill up. That's kind of, thankfully, that's just gone. And it's 10 years later, but I'm still very interested in exploring, because every single moment is literally brand new. So the thing about being in the present moment is you can't get bored, you know, because it's brand new now and now and now. And all the people I kind of look up to, all the ancient Zen masters, they live to the, you know, grand old ages, 100, 110. And you think, well, why are they still practicing at 110? Because this never stops being new. Exactly. Yeah. You haven't had the next insight yet.
Yeah.
You know, so that keeps me kind of learning and being interested and still practicing. You know,
that's what fascinates me more and more. Recently, we were chatting to a gentleman a few weeks ago, George, and he's only 22, but self-developing in different ways, but very much on a every day's a school day almost mentality. Just learning awareness and new techniques. So, which maybe brings me on to, we've touched outside of the podcast on Wim Hof, and I suppose again you exploring new experiences, and that's something again for those people out there. Again, Google who Wim Hof is, but that's an experience you've explored as well. How did you find that?
I mean, not lots, and I tried to take the cold showers, and in the summer I was, as part of my run, I'd go and get in the Groudle River, and you know, because, you know, traditionally, we've as a species we've been in the cold, and if you look, say, in Zen or these other, you know, traditions like, you know, Shaolin monks and all this kind of cool stuff, well, they would go and meditate under freezing waterfalls. You know, the Tibetan monks would meditate in the snow and generate enough heat that they would melt the snow around them.
Wow.
I think it's called the inner fire. So this is this kind of lost knowledge. You know, we've known it for hundreds of thousands of years, but we've just kind of forgotten it, and we're not being taught it. So it's not on our radar then. What's on the radar is X Factor, donuts, and, you know, the 9 to 5 job. And I mean, and that's fine, but that's literally That's just the very, very surface of who and what you are.
Mm-hmm.
So Ian Kirk, who is a friend of mine, and he's an official Wim Hof instructor. He's friends with Wim. So he was holding a workshop, so I went to explore being in the cold actually as a way to test my mindfulness, because I hate the cold. I mean, who wants to be cold? I'm cold anyway. Anytime I shake someone's hand, they say, "Oh my God, you're cold." So the idea of going into cold water on purpose was like, my mind was like, why the hell would you do that? But I wanted to see if I could bring in my mindfulness to help me do it. And so it's actually quite addictive, you know, going into the cold. And I'm still kind of playing around with that.
Yeah.
But it's just doing what people have done forever.
Yeah. I've tried a little bit more just the cold showers, and again, it's a lot of it's about the mind and being able to get, like anything, you know, you step into a cold shower, it's the last, you know, your body, your whole mind's going, don't step forward, don't step forward, don't step forward.
From, again, someone who doesn't really know that background, why are you going into freezing cold water? Are you trying to tell your mind to, is that again to be in, like, what are you trying to change in your mindset at that moment? Is it the fear of, you know, it's going to be cold and don't go into it, or is it going into it and blocking out the fact, oh my God, this is freezing cold? Like,
it's actually, well, that's part of it, is just, you know, going past the mind that says don't do it, it's cold. You do it anyway. Feel the fear and do it anyway, if you like. But I think certainly the way Ian talks about it, the effects, the positive physiological effects cold and ice cold water has on your system for a few minutes anyway, is you know, there's huge benefits to it. Boosted immune system, more brown fat, the health benefits. Okay. It's better than an espresso apparently. And I like, once you come out of a cold shower or a river, you're so focused. And whilst you're in the cold, it's hard to think about anything. So you drop into that natural clear mind state. And then the key is, because you said, what do you block it out? And this is the key word with mindfulness and meditation. And I work with people with, you know, chronic pain and things like that. The key is always relax. Relax into the pain, relax into the cold. Don't tense up around it, relax into it. Then there's no problem.
Yeah. I know I've got Wim Hof's book that I need to really finish. He talks techniques how to regulate your body temperature, and I mean, he climbs mountains that are covered in snow in underpants. He's a character and a half, isn't he? For sure, he's a character and a half. Well, thank you. That I think certainly know Matt found that informative. Definitely, that's why I wanted you to come in, Mike, to chat and hopefully spread the word of mindfulness. If people want to reach out to you, how do they do that?
You can just find me on Facebook. There's a Mike Kewley Mindfulness group on Facebook you can join, and I'm always posting videos and articles and things like that. Or you can find out more through my website, which is mikekewley.com.
Okay. Obviously, if you want to go on his courses, like I say, I've been on one and I can certainly highly recommend that. I'm sure I'll be finding another in due course. Also, just as a bonus episode really for people, Mike teaches techniques, various techniques, and one of them for mindfulness, and one of them we'll add on as a bonus episode. It's around 10 minutes long, just walks through sort of some breathing exercises that you can do, you know, ideally in the morning. I think it's the best time. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to start the day, because then you're starting with that mindset that's already calm and focused. But just play with it wherever you can fit it in, and just have a go and see how it makes you feel as you do it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks again, Mike.
Yeah, thank you.
And Matt, just to finish off.
Yep. Usual housekeeping. So wherever you're listening, be that Spotify, SoundCloud, podcast, or other, please like, subscribe, share, and give us those 5-star reviews to help boost. Facebook, we are the M-Word Podcast. Twitter, our handle is Manx Sport Pod, and Instagram, we are the M-Word IOM. Again, just wanted to reiterate, if you know anyone, or if you are someone who wants to come in and sit down and chat with us, please get in touch, because we'd be more than welcome to speak to you.
So thank you everyone. Thanks again for letting us get into your ears. It's word out from Martin.
And word out from Matt.
Hello humans, welcome to the M Word, the Manx Sports podcast, brought to you today by Martin. I hope you enjoyed our last episode with Mike Kewley. If you haven't listened to it, I'd suggest before you listen to this episode, you go back and listen to it. We talked to Mike about mindfulness and mindfulness in sport and how it can be a very useful tool. So we strongly suggest you go back and listen. What we've done is taken one of Mike's techniques and created it into an audio format. And we'd suggest you find 10 minutes in your day today, tomorrow, stick your headphones in, sit somewhere quiet and listen to Mike and the techniques and follow the techniques for 5 or 10 minutes. We always suggest you do it on a regular basis. I think it's about building a habit and building a routine that will help you clear your mind, whether it's day-to-day pressures or sports. So I'm going to hand over to Mike now, who will walk you through the processes. Do enjoy, and please join us for our next episode soon.
Okay, so welcome to the 10-minute guided breath awareness practice. This practice boosts and develops 2 superpowers, calm and focus. Focus and calm. You can do the practice with eyes closed like me, or if you prefer, you can just kind of half close your eyes, just looking down at the floor between your feet. Okay, and all you have to do is listen. So we can just begin by noticing any sounds that might be popping up. What's the furthest sound you can hear? What's the closest sound you can perceive right now? What's the most intimate sound you're aware of? And then we can just drop our attention down into the body and just noticing how the chair feels, how your posture feels on the chair. And then we can just get a general sense, a general feel of what's happening in this body right now, in this particular moment of being alive. What have we brought to the chair with us? So just check if there's anywhere in the body that feels tight or tense, uncomfortable, perhaps even painful. And just see if you can locate where that sensation lives in the body. But we can also check to see if there's anywhere in the body right now that feels still, calm, at rest, okay. And then we can just start to drop down and tune in to the natural movement of breath as it rises and falls in the body. So with this practice, we don't control the breath or hold the breath. We just let breathing happen. Just let your body breathe. But what we can do is surf or ride the wave of each breath as it rises and falls in the body. So this is the first gear shift, away from the head, down into breath. And as you're riding each breath in the body, just see if you can notice which breath feels better to be in right now. Which one has the edge to it? From the breath in the body, we can now just shift our focus up and into the feeling of breath as it passes through your nose. So just take a few moments to see if you can find the breath in the nose. Is it there? And just check where you feel it most intensely. So it could be in your nostrils, could be further back in the nose. You may even notice it on the top of your lip. Wherever you feel the breath most intensely, that is your own personal anchor point. That is your focal point, your target, if you like. And for the rest of this practice, we're just going to see if we can stay there. Okay? Tracking or riding each breath as it flows through the nose in real time. Every time your attention wanders away or drifts off into thoughts, that's fine. That's what happens. The mind is like a little puppy. But every time we catch ourselves thinking, we just shift our attention straight back into that raw flow of breath in the nose. We're not trying to make anything happen. We're not trying to stop anything from happening. Sounds are still coming and going. Thoughts are appearing, disappearing. Feelings and sensations in the body are moving, buzzing, popping, aching. All of that is allowed to continue. Okay, that's called life. But what we can do is just prioritize to focus on each breath as it flows through the nose. And just allow everything else to happen in the background. Just check the temperature of your breath right now. Is it icy cold? Is it red hot? Is it lukewarm and vague? And just see if you can stay with what you find. And now we can check the texture of the breath as it flows through your nose. So is it soft, silky, smooth? Does the breath just flow? Or is it gritty? Is it brittle? Does the breath break up? Again, just staying with whatever you discover. And now we can just check how your in-breath feels as it enters the body. So does your in-breath melt in, flow in, fade in? Or does it meet resistance, tension? Do you have to work a little bit to breathe in? And check your out-breath. How does the out-breath feel as it leaves the body? Does it meet resistance, tension? Or does it just flow out, fade out, dissipate, melt away, fade? Okay, just take a look at what your mind is doing right now. That mental screen where thoughts happen. Just notice what's happening there. So it could be active, there could be thinking happening. And if that's the case, that's okay, they come and they go. Or it could be a blank or still screen. Just check between your ears. Okay, what's happening there? So there could be internal chatter, noise, the voice in your head. And if you're noticing that, well, just notice. Let it come and go. It's like a radio on in the background. Or there could be silence. And if there's silence, we can listen in to the silence. We can drop down into the body, into the torso, and just notice your current emotional state or mood. You know, is there emotional reactivity here? Tense tummy, tense chest. Again, just noticing. Or there could be just a sense of flat calm, feeling neutral, still, at rest. If that's there, we can really drop down into that. And then just shifting into the body on the chair now, our whole body experience on the chair. And what I want you to do is just see if you can find anywhere in the body that feels still. And just resting with or tracking that stillness in the body. In a moment I will ring a bell 3 times just to finish. Just like we track the breath, see if you can track or stay with each chime until it fades into silence. Okay, thank you very much. I hope that was useful, and thank you for sitting with me today.